What is the meaning of acceptance? I still remember the words of the Tlaxishi professor asking that in class, his narrow tongue darting out of his green mouth to lick his eyeballs clean. He did it more than most of his species, and as a budding xenobiologist, I knew that meant he was uncomfortable among so many students. Unsurprising, since his species was known to be primarily made up of loners. That alone made him unique in this job. But more than that, what made him most exceptional was the way he understood species other than his own. Hence his question, and it was the very question that launched whole careers, because it began with a race called Homo sapiens sapiens, or as they typically called themselves, humans. No answer followed his question, though many of us, with claws and tentacles and nails and more, were rapidly scrolling through the digital text to search for the word. The echo of his question faded away against the walls. And this too was what made him unique. Unlike most professors in the university, he conducted classes in person, demanding we socialize up close. For reasons none of us quite understood, it somehow made us better students, and little by little his policy was spreading to other instructors. What is the meaning of family? He asked the follow-up question, and our hasty searching picked up speed. My neighbor, a Chitilxian with a rubber touch assist over his slimy digit, was typing the new word into the search bar. A hand went up before mine. A biological classification including several subclassifications. The answer came from one of the miniature dwarf species, an avian race coated in spiny feathers. It came up no higher than my knee. His name was Chirapus, and he was top of the class. After me. My frustration burned as he outdid me, only for relief to flood air sacs when the professor shook his head. No, that is a definition, but not the one I mean. Our Tlaxishi professor, Sexlith by name, licked each of his 5 eyes in rapid succession. I knew that he hated correcting people. But I also knew that the definition he sought was not in this book, so I raised my fur-covered arm and opened my elongated jaw. My tongue wagged as I spoke, and I tried to keep my tail still when I said, "Professor, no other meaning is present in the book, please. Can you tell us what you mean?" In all my life I had never heard the noise he made next. It was clear he was imitating some species we had not seen up close, and here is where it all began. He pushed a button somewhere out of view, and a curious creature appeared on the screen, while his mouth made this haw-haw-haw kind of noise that couldn't have been natural to him. On screen was a bipedal species with fur on their round heads, small thin lips and only 2 arms. This is the species you will learn the answers to those questions from. If you can understand this species, you can understand any species. In my 150 cycles of instruction and research, I have never found another like this one. They bond with inanimate objects, that fictional characters, unknown infants, outsiders, as strongly as Vastionoviraptor with its own eggs. We gasped, chirped, gulped, belched and rattled. Whatever our own expressions of shock as different species, we made it. I know, it sounds impossible. But this is the only species that is capable of finding family and forming communities out of any species, or at least any that they have ever been observed with. They domesticate predators and bond even with species that might otherwise eat them. If one is rejected by its parents, it may find new ones or ones to fill that role. There are stronger species, there are smarter species, there are faster species, there are longer-lived species. But there are no species more passionate. They are in their mating season all year long and constantly form new groups that grow and change. If you can get one to bond with you, they will die for you without regret. There is no species so full of contradiction as the Homo sapiens sapiens sapiens. They love more deeply, hate more deeply, laugh. That was that noise I was making earlier. And are both greed and generosity given flesh. They appear weak, but because of all these contradictions, they are not only the apex predator of their planet, but no invading armada dares cross into a system where a human colony has formed bonds with others. The great victory of 47,592 was brought about by this species acting on a distress call from my own species when I was a child. A human starship responded instinctively to our call for aid and destroyed themselves in a suicide run which crippled the invaders. Self-termination for another species. The professor paused at the rhetorical question. It did seem at odds with all reason. No species I knew would do that. And though I'd heard of that victory, the strange vessel was barely a footnote. Humans were not even named. A low rumble of uttered doubt passed among us all. I promise you, it is true. I was there. That was the cause of the peace which followed. Self-termination for another species was unheard of, and the Zenti didn't know what to make of it. I was present on the station while the impromptu negotiations took place, and the study of humans by both sides began. I knew I had to learn more, and spent my life among them as soon as I was able. I spent 100 of their years in a single human community. Within 10 years I gained acceptance. Not long after that I was neighbor, then brother and uncle. I watched their generation grow and age and die. And to my shock, I felt that grief myself. To know humanity's depths is to find them in ourselves. That is how I got here. That is why he leveled his shaking finger claw out toward us in our seats, and we all sat a little more alertly when he did so. You are sitting among one another. All of you comprise long-lived species, 300 years on the high end, and all of you will spend the next 50 years in an extended study of the humans. You will join their communities, learn about them, and about yourselves. When you are through, you will know what family means in a way that you never dreamed before, and carry that spark out to all your home worlds from there. Who can say what will happen? But I think we will have a better galaxy for it. I don't know why I felt so certain that he was right. Maybe because his reputation was so widespread? Maybe because he'd chosen us, hand-picked each of his students, and his faith in us made us more confident in him. But whatever the reason, I was suddenly even more eager to study than before. And even if I don't like it, what's 50 years, I thought? What I didn't know yet, but would know beyond a doubt when I was in the last days of my 50th year, that the answer to my question was the best years of my life. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Of course I should tell you my species. I'm Dlamisa. We're a furry species with 4 upright ears on each side of our head that are slightly triangular, with tails that grow about as long as a human arm, curved legs that are fixed at the knee, and though we have 2 arms, we're capable of locking the elbow joints so that we can run on all 4s as well as on 2 legs. Our mouths are elongated and have a row of sharp teeth, and though our fur color varies, mine is a mix of russet red and black. To be blunt, as I would be very embarrassed to learn, I look somewhat similar to their dogs. What a day that was. At least it turned out to be helpful. Now back to that day. A few of our number chose not to make the trip, a thing I think they would regret for the rest of their lives, as the human sector was very far away, taking months of travel by even the fastest ship. At least, until the humans invented the new propulsion method of redoubling speed by electron recombination. But that's for the astrochemophysics department. Me, I was only concerned with learning as much as I could, and the professor proved he earned his status by providing us with a wealth of information in the days that led up to our trip. Human entertainment, mythology, music, religion, and social conventions for the place we would be staying, all were provided to us. That was the first time I realized just why Homo sapiens sapiens can be so terrifying. It wasn't their love of fear. There were whole genres of entertainment that kept their psychology on edge, but that in and of itself was enough to drive 2 more students to drop out. Fear is something all other known species avoid, but humans embrace the void. I found it fascinating. The part that scared me was what it took for humans to picture a threat. Gods? Demons? Natural disasters that wipe out planets? Aliens whose technology defied reality? Humans needed the impossible to feel threatened. Anything else was just an ordinary galactic minicycle, and in all their terrifying films and televised series. The story was a journey to human triumph. Some thought it was self-aggrandizing, but our teacher put it this way. Humans made that leap into the void in 1/10 of the time it took my species to find the courage to do so. Humans define themselves by their will to overcome anything, this to drive themselves to the limit and push beyond to make new limits for the next generation to overcome. Dying for a friend? Dying for an ideal? A human will throw away their life for an infant where Mott would consider their offspring expendable and just make another. And they will die happy if they believe their death made a better tomorrow. Their films tell us that they see themselves as having boundless potential. And when I was a small one, listening to the telecom where the humans came in with cannons blazing just because they said they would help us, I came to believe in it too. It took me ages to find a translation for yippee-ki-yay motherfucker. But the telecom was still broadcasting after that, up to the moment their ship collided with our attackers. And I heard something I'd never heard before when intelligent races died. Music. They died to the sound of music and singing death songs. They are something to fear, but also something to hope for, as you will see. I immersed myself in more of their media on the long journey, pirate movies where pirates, the lowest of the low, still found it in themselves to die with courage, war films. So many of those, with people giving up their lives for causes even those they couldn't win. Romances where that curious, passionate bonding was on full display. I admit I found it strange how they bonded to predator pets, but it was impossible to deny that this was what I was seeing when their dog creatures were cradled and cared for like infants. Nobody really thinks about how powerful bonding truly is, and yet. Now my snout was rubbed right in it. It was 2 months later when we encountered the first human patrols. Their vessels were much bigger than they used to be, and that was when I learned something more interesting. Humans brought their miniature communities into space, their families. Bonded mates, children, even in some cases, their old who we would normally leave behind. It seemed strange, but when I first saw a human face, that was even stranger. They were flat, with very small noses in the middle of their face. The human who spoke to my professor on screen had a thick black fur around his mouth and deep-set eyes that seemed small compared to mine, but after a few pleasantries and an ID exchange, we were allowed to dock. Our professor then selected 3 of us to join him on board the human vessel, a chance to explore a little of the miniature society that humans formed before we reached the whole hive of them on their homeworld, where our host families waited for us. The vessel we docked at was military, with giant cannons the size of whole buildings back home. A hallmark of the human design philosophy of big explosions are the best kind, but because these vessels were so large, when we crossed the boarding tubes we found a small hover vehicle waiting for us. This highlighted my second experience with human design philosophy. There is no such thing as too fast, only how fast you can make it go. It was no wonder they invented the method of transport that finally broke the subspace speed limit that baffled scientists for ages. Strap in and hold tight a small human female, or so I assumed it to be because of what we'd been told about chest's voice pitch, told us. The strap was a 4-point harness, and there was a crossbar in front that we were meant to hold on to if things got too intense. And then my tongue was yanked out of my mouth and the ship became a blur. Never in my life had I been both so thrilled and so damn scared. The air battered my face and carried my fur back behind me. My tail wiggled with joy underneath my seat, and I could see what I recognized as a smile on the woman's face. Our companions made noises of alarm. Chitin scales shed and my Ulian roommate's stink sack activated, briefly causing the hovercraft to swerve. And then the human made a noise I later learned was laughter when she kept it swerving and we were upside down on the ceiling. You would not believe how hard it was to find a proper translation for the word "we" that she kept screaming as we looped around the empty corridor. We lurched to a stop that rattled my bones, and my professor finally said something I knew was key to introducing oneself to new humans. Shall we grab a beer? I knew from the videos that the human woman's grin made the rest of our trip promising, but as my companions were voiding their orifices onto the floor while trying to unhitch themselves, they unfortunately missed it. As to what happened next, well, you'll have to wait to find out. I'd never been unsteady on my legs before that moment. My slimy colleague didn't have legs of his own. It didn't have a permanently solid form. It could solidify itself for short periods. And on this occasion, when it departed the hovercraft, as soon as the hardened exterior was rendered gelatinous again, it was jiggling like it had just sat through a quake. I wobbled a little, and to my surprise, the small human female immediately was by my side and put her hand on my arm, her soft skin squeezed as delicately as a Fadian's featherfall, and she gave me that smile expression again, though a little smaller, and asked me, "Are you okay?" "I'm sorry. I didn't think to ask how any of you could handle speed." An apology is a very strange custom humans engage in. It is an expression of regret for some offense or inflicted feeling. Curiously, as I would later learn, they have a non-apology that is disguised as an apology. I know this may sound strange, but if a human tells me, "I'm sorry if you feel," or "I'm sorry, but," or "I'm sorry you," perhaps you see a pattern here. All of these 3 forms either include a negation but, or they make the apology a reference to the other person's perceptions. It turns out that true apologies are focused only on the one who actually did the thing being apologized for. "I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry I was late. I'm sorry for not thinking of you. All true apologies among humans include the speaker taking responsibility for themselves and their actions. This subtlety would quickly become important as I moved through human society after I met my host family. But in that moment I just found her touch pleasant. I didn't realize how warm humans' bodies could be. I'm fine. Thank you, please don't worry about it. I knew what to say from those videos, and she responded immediately with a broader smile. My professor's tongue darted out and licked his eyeball only once, and I knew I handled myself well. Please, let me introduce you to some of my friends and get you all a drink on me, she said, and pulled out a little plastic card, or rather, on the fleet's good relations account. She winked, a gesture I knew to indicate either playfulness or deception, and unsure of which I was being subjected to, I elected to nod silently. "Come on," she said, and approached the double doors. They slid into the wall, and I was immediately struck by the noise of voices similar to hers, higher pitch and deeper pitch. I generally thought humans were cleanly divided between obvious male and obvious female. But this proved that textbooks do not cover everything. It gave us the far ends, but not the spectrum. Some humans seemed to be almost as genderless as my fluidic companion. I couldn't tell one from another, and some of them played this up. The room itself was enormous. Our own species all used small spaces with few figures, if any, but this was vast, easily a few hundred of my paces in either direction, filled with tables and something I recognized from films as bars. My colleagues, fellow students I suppose, were mute, but I said immediately, "Lead on." She took well to that, and her feet made a small skipping stride. Strangely, she didn't keep her back to us, but showed her back to the others of her species, and began to chat with us as if she'd known us for a lifetime. "So we have a lot of things here, but based on the data your ship transmitted, bourbon and beer are both viable for all of you, and you can place your cargo order on the screen so you can drink and work at the same time." Is drinking important? My fluidic semi-permeable fellow student asked in his bubbling voice that approximated human vocal sounds. "Yes, very. In one of our ancient empires, Persia, I think." She paused and looked away as she searched her memory. Yes, that was it. Whenever they had a disagreement, they would first argue sober, then get drunk and argue the same thing again. They wouldn't accept an argument unless it makes sense in both states. Alcohol plays an important role in social behavior for our race. It lowers our inhibitions, makes us more truthful, and for most of us, it makes us more open to friendship. She frowned a little, I admit. Some people it makes into real jerks. But as long as you avoid those, it's fine. By the time she said that, her back smacked into a golden tube that ran along the edge of the bar behind which a towering wall of human meat stood. Unlike most of his race, he had a bald head up top, and he was slightly over the normal weight that I saw from the others. But he did have sharp-looking eyes, like a hunter. "Hey Mark, a round of bourbons for my new friends and I." Friends, I wondered about that. I knew humans could bond quickly, and I understood the meaning of this friend term, but I didn't expect it this fast. The human she called Mark spun around, tipped a few clear bottles holding a dark amber liquid into a few transparent glasses, and then slid them up to each of us as we stood on either side of the human. "A toast," she said, and raised up her glass before we could drink. "This is liquid. Is not toast bread that you have cooked?" Twice the burbling voice of my colleague asked, and both Mark and our new human laughed. "He's funny. I'm Lisa, by the way. And no, well, yes, but also not because it's something we do before we drink. It's where we make a wish for something good. You're travelers, like us, so we have this tradition on our ship. When we encounter travelers, we raise a glass and toast, that we wish for safe travels for those we meet. So, a toast to safe travels. Lisa gave us that same broad smile again, and then slammed back a drink and smacked her lips before sliding her card across the bar. "Keep him coming, Mark. We have to show them how humans do it." That was how I learned about two more things. First, human competitiveness, shot by shot. Until my semi-permeable friend was a puddle, my professor's tongue was dangling over the bar, and I found myself embarrassingly passing out, curled around her feet. And also, the absurd human tolerance for alcohol. I didn't learn until well after my first hangover passed that the human liver actually had a special part of itself which only existed to process alcohol. I had great fun. I think, from what I remember. Before I continue, I should add that this was not my last experience with Homo sapiens sapiens and alcohol. It was my first and my most painful. At least with the aftermath. But those other times lie ahead, assuming you read on in this humble manuscript. For now, it is enough to know that I woke up with a splitting headache, my professor slurring his words with a limp tongue, the chitin half shed from one companion. He got so drunk he molted halfway and passed out, while our slimy colleague took another half-day to rise beyond a puddle of his former self and utterly unable to speak. But we did wake up in a single room, each of us with a small wicker basket and a bottle of that wonderful stuff, along with a friendly note from a friend I would never see again. Lisa wrote a little scrawl that took hours to translate. To this day, I think she was drunk when she wrote it, but it read, "To toast to safe travels with the next people you meet, who have a long way to go before they get to where they're going. All the best, Lisa." My mouth didn't really let me smile, but the warmth of her well wishes reached me somehow, as did the memory of that first human touch. That kind of openness and welcome isn't found anywhere else that I have ever seen, not before and not since, at least not away from humans. Of course, today I know that she was somewhat exceptional, even for her kind. Not everybody is like that, but it was genuine, and it was far from rare. To understand the importance, the significance of this, I need to point something else out. Human diplomacy is second to none. They are, most of them, uniquely attuned to searching out the needs of others, their fears, their hopes, and presenting themselves as the ones who can meet or dash them. Human diplomacy has become the bridge across which species have moved to make peace. Understanding others is the thing they are arguably the best at. Their uniquely social species has set them up as the arbiters of choice for multiple races, and in that ordinary human, I understood why. Because the good ones, they really care. Even a stranger can matter to them as if they're needed, even if they'll never see that one again once they've given help. It's a very strange thing, but it helped me believe my teacher when he talked about the self-termination run that the humans launched just to rescue one outpost full of civilians. I never did see Lisa after that. The cargo was loaded onto our ship, and we were being escorted by the vessel we'd so recently traveled upon. The endless stars in the void still terrified so many that, quite frankly speaking, most races had very few who were willing to traverse the stars. Dollarers and remote ships were the norm. But humans seemed to embrace it like they were born there. Some said they were, that their race evolved on Earth from material that first formed in space, or on their planet Mars that was shot to Earth by an impact from orbit. Nobody knows for sure, but the result, whatever the truth, people who play music in the unbounded dark go singing to their deaths. And when the alarm rang announcing pirates, the reason why nobody in their right mind, what was the word, humps with humans? No, they have another term why nobody fucks with humankind. The Zenti were shut down a lot of their military in the post-war era, but a handful of them simply took their ships and ran, becoming raiders, minor warlords and pirates wherever patrols were few. But most didn't last. Or if they did, it was because they went into hiding. I guess our vessel looked too tempting. Not surprising, education vessels were filled with elites that could be captured and traded for ample goods and resources. Perhaps that was why they attacked even knowing they were in human territory. The ship shook harder than I did when getting off that hover car, and alarm stinks, pheromones, cries and screeches were audible in every direction. I looked to my teacher for reassurance, and to my surprise, he was not even licking his eyeballs. "We are in human space. Just wait," he said, and pointed to the window to the void where a fleet of a dozen ships came into view. They were green with wide wings on which a row of cannons sat. Their pulsing rays battered our shields and the ship shook like mad, and it was only my teacher's preternatural calm that allowed me to keep from voiding my bowels and hiding in fear. They gave us drink. They gave us food and supplies. They promised us safety. "We will be fine," he said to reassure those who had their doubts. Me? I wondered if Lisa was going to be on the ship he anticipated coming to our aid. And that in and of itself was surprising. Why did I think of her? I've never thought of anyone else of any species so quickly before. These people, they are infectious, and over the telecom device came something my professor promised would come in human space. Music. I didn't know what it was called at the time, but now I know its name. Ride of the Valkyries. And human voices came through every channel. I rushed to the window as fast as my wobbly legs and substantial hangover would permit, and pressed my eyes to the window to see for myself. Nobody rushed into a fight like this, not even my homeworld. The human ship emerged from the purple gas cloud where it lay in wait, and though it was one alone, it began to fire from its many cannons, and explosions rocked the space around the Xenti pirates. "Not to worry, just carry on your voyage. We'll handle these, and safe travels." I recognized the voice of the dark-furred human, forceful and, as I would later understand, proud. Humans had something curious about them, a work ethic not often found outside of artisans. They take pride in the things they deem their purpose, their profession. Whether they are a janitor or an admiral, they proclaim excellence in their chosen craft as one of the highest virtues. And for their admiralty, that apparently included courage. I watched the fight between the human ship and the pirates as they broke off to engage the authorities, and watched as one by one the raiders were set to listing, their ships burning in space, each one disabled, broken, or shattered into a million tiny pieces, so small that it was like they never existed at all. Before long they were out of view, and I couldn't see it anymore. They are a rare type of predator. An active hunter species, those almost never develop civilizations. The others are all sedentary, almost to the last inhabited world ... but theirs. The humans evolved to run their prey to death, or walk them to death. They are the only known species in the galaxy that can run all day and night. The known record for a human was one who ran for more than 3 days and nights without stopping before he collapsed. My professor said it like he was telling me the time. And I got a sense of just how dangerous this race could be if they were provoked. It seemed so odd to think of Lisa and Mike then. They seemed so friendly, and so non-threatening without even claws or sharp teeth to speak of. But the heedless courage of that single ship that could take on a dozen without fear and win? I felt a tingle in my spine that it seems was common among humans too, when I found something to fear. I wondered sometimes if their shortened lifespans were part of why they seemed so full of energy. They have a saying that a candle which burns twice as bright burns half as long, and if this was true, then it was why their race lived so short compared to so many of us. If I could experience D as much as they did, I would trade lifespans with them in a heartbeat. Of course, as you are reading this, you must surely know we survived the brief encounter with the pirates, but before you proceed on with this accounting, I want to make sure you note something. Our ship was not completely unarmed. We could have fought beside the human vessel, but our captain chose to abandon our rescuers. It was an eminently practical thing to do, and I had it checked into when it was possible. He was not reprimanded for it in any way, nor did I ever find criticism of him for it. Even me, at that moment as we fled deeper into human space, didn't think about what he was doing, and nor did it occur to me to criticize him for it. I'm sure you are. In agreement, but then. Compare the human ship captain's actions to our own. The human willingness to fight and die was far in excess of their own survival instinct. They sought the fight and rushed to it, while we ran away, which course creates an empire. Who do you want protecting your ship when you travel? You may think the humans mad, but their madness, if that is what it is not without purpose or value of its own. Now, on with the accounting. As the days slipped past, our professor began to relay more stories to us of his time on Earth, of human customs, birthdays, drinking songs, sports, child rearing. It seems he became like a grandfather to a pair of human children, watching them grow up and have children of their own just before he had to leave the planet when his allotted time was up. In all his stories, my teacher never once sent his tongue near his eyeballs. It was more like he wasn't talking to us at all, really. More to himself, he knew the name of every member of the family and those of their neighbors and the days that they died. Reader, I'm sure I don't need to tell you how rare this is for anyone at all. And yet he did it for the members of another species. The more I learned, the more interested I became, and day slipped into day with more history, more culture lessons, and more on human mental processes. I learned about bashfulness. See, some humans, strangely enough, find nudity to be troubling, even shameful. They come from a death world. The act of breathing corrodes their lungs over a lifetime. The place is riddled with natural disasters, and their own sun is lethal to them. As such, they create clothing to cover and protect their bodies. They get so used to it that being without it is strange, so the end result is a species that is shy about their bodies, but can endure almost anything. The human body is strange. They have enough muscle to pull 17 tonners, but only if all muscles pull in the same direction. However, they can't do that. Their limbs seem fragile and easily injured thanks to a lack of natural armor, but they produce a chemical in their brains that puts them into a frenzy of bloodlust that will ignore pain until they are bled dry. Essentially, they can fight until they run out of murder fuel in their veins if they are triggered in just the wrong way. There are stories of past humans called berserkers who, on losing an arm, would pick it up and swing their severed arm like a club, beating others to death with it. They may sound in this sort of depiction like monsters, which admittedly explains their media of horror entertainment. Recall what I said about anything less than impossible being seen as ordinary and nothing special. But it wasn't this that my professor was so drawn to, not based on his stories. So I focused on that, and all that he had to say, until we saw a tiny mote of dust caught in a sunbeam, and that mote of dust became a little blue marble, a nothing special world in a universe full of trillions of galaxies, of billions of solar systems and endless planets within the whole. But this was going to be our home. I noted this moment that, when I was drawing close to the planet Earth, I didn't miss my own home even a little. But out of the corner of my eyes, I watched my normally reserved professor press his hand to the glass as if he were trying to just get one bit closer to that world, one fraction of a second faster. It didn't look like much, not to my eyes. But still, it was something. I could see the doubt in my comrades still. They barely looked at all. But I felt the excitement of the new experience ahead at least. The world ahead grew larger and larger, and the voice came over the telecom, "Brace yourselves for entry." Docking in one span. We raced to our security harnesses, strapped ourselves in, and waited for the rattling to stop. As our ship came down and the bright yellow sun became a dot instead of a looming monster, I noticed how very green so much seemed to be. It was a strange shift from the black and blue plants I was used to, but it was the least of the surprises I would face, and those would begin from the moment we exited our ship.